Today, for just under $30 at the time of making this video, we are going to be building a deck whose central philosophy revolves around utilizing a particular genre of card: mono green pump spells. Often located in the front of your booster pack somewhere, these cards often get tossed to the side in lieu of more steady and powerful effects. But today, we are rescuing them from the bulk pile and showcasing that every card can shine given the right context. So without further ado, the EDH Jank Center presents Get Jacked, building a deck around Giant Growth. So Giant Growth and other pump spells like it just say some iteration of target creature gets the buff until end of turn. These can be instant or sorcery speed, and in the case of Giant Growth, it only costs 1 mana. And all of these usually are relatively cheap. I love these kinds of spells because they're cheap on the wallet, cheap in mana cost, and they're sneaky good. So I set out on a quest to find a very powerful pump spell commander when I stumbled upon our general for today, Aragorn the Uniter. Aragorn the Uniter is a red, green, white, blue legendary creature human noble from the Lord of the Rings set. It says whenever you cast a white spell, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever you cast a blue spell, scry 2. Whenever you cast a red spell, Aragorn the Uniter deals 3 damage to target opponent. And whenever you cast a green spell, target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn, and it's a 5/5. Ding, ding, ding. That is the ability we care about, folks. Now, I know what you're thinking. Jordan, any strategy would be good when you have access to 4 or 5 colors, and I genuinely would agree with you. However, it wouldn't be the Jank Center if we didn't flip or twist this in some way. So today, we're building a mono green Aragorn the Uniter deck. This gives us access to that sweet pump ability on Aragorn and makes us get creative with our choices since we only have access to 1 out of the 4 colors Aragorn normally gives us access to. And since almost every spell in this deck is green, everything we cast will be triggering that pump ability on him, which is yeah, pretty decent. Okay, now that we've covered the commander, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Our first category of the day are the pump spells themselves. Since we're relying heavily on one specific type of card here in this build, I wanted to make sure that most, if not all, of the pump spells we included also did something extra when they get cast. This way, we are constantly getting more bang for our buck. For example, Aggressive Urge not only pumps a creature on our board, it also draws us a card and effectively replaces itself. Ambuscade allows us to remove something problematic on board while letting our target creature get jacked. Running cards like this leave room in the deck for other fun selections that we'll get to later, but for now, let's showcase some more pump spells. Obviously, we have the OG Giant Growth, which is just absolutely classic, but not the OG Giant Growth, because that thing is like very expensive. Then we are also running some relatively underplayed cards with things like Might of Oaks, Sudden Spinnerets, and Wild Hunger. Lastly, cards like Hunter's Prowess draw us into a ton of cards and keep the pump train going. Alright, so now that we've talked about pump spells, we are going to have to point them at things. So now we're going to talk targets. Anyone who has watched the channel or listened to the podcast knows that I am a sucker for 1-drop creatures, and luckily they fit perfectly within the idea of this build. Slamming lil guys like Almighty Brushwag and Defiant Elf down on turn 1 sets us up for some huge early swings if we can get Aragorn out fast. Oh, and they have Trample, so we can swing confidently knowing that there will always be some level of damage getting through to our opponents. We are also running a few unblockable creatures as well with Silhana Ledgewalker and Gingerbrute, as well as some hexproof creature cards like Gladecover Scout and Lumberknot, the latter of which will just be passively getting bigger and more jacked as more creatures die throughout the game. Then once you add pump spells on top of that, we are truly cooking, boys. Cards like Rotwolf can end the game for our opponents very quickly with Infect, while cards like Gnarlback Rhino and Reflective Golem snag us some value when we target them. This suite of creatures is probably one of my favorite groups of creatures I've put together in a while. We love a ragtag group of misfits. Alright, now for our last group of quote-unquote miscellaneous support cards. Whenever I'm building, I always leave room for a suite of cards that help push us along into our win cons or just generally synergize with our game plan. Earlier, when I was saying that having our pump spells do multiple things saves us slots in our deck list, the slots are for cards like these, so let's check them out. Elvish Herder makes sure that any creature that we're swinging that doesn't have Trample does. This can be super valuable for obvious reasons, but doing it at instant speed can be a sneaky combat trick if your opponents aren't paying attention. Family's Favor is another card that I haven't seen very much of, but does work in this build. This protects our attacking creature, and we're usually only swinging with 1 anyways, and draws us a card if it hits for combat damage. This also comes down earlier than our commander usually, giving us a good start as we advance our game plan forward. Versatility is the name of the game with Glorious Sunrise. All of those options can help us in-game. It is over $1, but since this deck is running a lot of very cheap spells, we can afford a piece or two that's over $1. Cards like Nessian Boar, Tree Shaker Chimera, and Lure assist us in getting through for damage if we're dealing with full board states from our opponents, usually in the later stages of the game. Lastly, this build allows us to run some really fun green Magecraft cards from Strixhaven. Things like Karok Wrangler and Dragon's Guard Elite are so sick. Oh, and Deeproot Channeler does something similar as well. Sorry, big guy, I didn't mean to leave you out. All right, now let's round it up with cards from what I like to call the, quote, toolbox, unquote. The toolbox is essentially anything that is ramp, removal, recursion, and protection. Honestly, there's nothing crazy going on, just a lot of staples, but something important to note is that literally all of these will be triggering Aragorn on cast, and that makes for some giant creatures, dude. Especially with protection spells at instant speed, pumping up a creature while being attacked could spell the difference between dying and staying alive, giving us a blocker that can deal with threats. And lastly, we've got to talk about the land base. The unfortunate thing here is, in order for this build to work, we cannot just run forests. Our commander specifies that we use a red, blue, white, and green mana in order to cast it. For this reason, we are going to have to run a bunch of weird tapped lands that have green in them. I know this will slow the deck down, but hey, this is a $30 deck with a big restriction, so cut me some slack. If you want to make this run smoother, feel free to add some nicer lands. It's very easy to do so. Additionally, we've got the obvious budget color fixing with Command Tower, but we've also got Pillar of the Parents, Gemstone Mine, and Path of Ancestry to also help out in that regard. We're also running Poison Dart Frog, Arcane Signet, and Toxicrene to mana fix even more. And yeah, that about does it for this build. I absolutely love this, and I think with another $20 you could really go ham with it. But I think even for $30 it does work, dude. I love exploring concepts like this, adding limitations to deck building, because it just makes you get so creative. With how many cards we have at our disposal in the Commander format, there are so many creative builds you can create, and that excites me. And I hope it excites you too in some way and inspires you to make some really cool creative builds. And that about does it for this week's video, folks. What card should I build around next? What cards would you run in this deck? Did I miss anything? I'm always down there in the comments, so come on down and have a chat with me. And hey, if you'd like to get extra entries in our monthly Discord giveaways, win prizes in our monthly deck building contests, and play spell table games with me and my podcast co-host Cress every month, check out our Patreon in the description below. We've got lots of awesome ways to support what we do here. And if you want to snag a Pyramid Designs playmat through our affiliate link, check that out in the description below. If you use our link, you get 30% off your purchase. For those who may not have the funds but still want to be part of the community, you can always hop in our Discord completely for free and join our wonderful community of Jank lovers. Another free way to support us is by liking and subscribing to the channel and following us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at EDH Jank Center. Alright guys, I'm out and I'll see you on the next video.